All right.
So would you say that when you go skiing at this point, are you as aggressive as you used to be or less aggressive these days?
I've never been aggressive.
Never been. Yeah.
Yeah. I probably a strong green or a very light blue. My wife is really good. She can do blacks, but I'm uncomfortable with speed.
Yeah.
Especially when I've got my ankles locked in a ski.
Right. We used to ski a couple of times every year growing up. And then I missed a big gap and then have done it maybe a handful of times in the last 5 or 6 years and pretty quickly noticed that I have a lot less interest in going fast or trying to get any jumps in or any of that stuff. I'm like, I made it this far without blowing out a knee. I'm not interested in trying it again. Joe goes a lot more frequently, and I don't know if you started to experience that yet or not.
Well, they say that the official age on average that where a human feels old, like that trigger point, is the age of 38. Mentally,
interesting.
Purely mentally, maybe physically, but mentally. And I'm well beyond 38. And I definitely look at some runs. I'm like, I could do that, but it would be wise if I didn't do that. That's the age that I'm at right now.
Yeah, I'm at the point where if I feel uncomfortable about something, why put myself through it, right?
Yeah.
So I enjoy just cruising and looking at the scenery and just enjoying the beauty, more than anything.
Yeah.
And the operate ski is not too bad.
Right.
No,
that's right.
Well, my oldest is 17 and he, this year we were skiing. We're active in Boy Scouts and we do this big Boy Scout trip. About 125 people go out to Winter Park, Colorado every February. And one of the days there's actual ski racing, like, giant slalom style ski racing. And this was the year that he finally beat Dad. And he not only beat me, I mean, it wasn't like by a tenth of a second. He flat out kicked my ass.
Is that NASCAR? Or they still call it NASCAR?
They don't. It's not affiliated with that anymore, but it's the same thing. And he's doing all these huge jumps in the terrain park, and I'm like, I will take my second place trophy and move along now. So
he did send me a picture of him like in the air, and the first thing I thought about, he plays soccer, and the first thing I thought about was, don't send that to your soccer coach because I don't know that he's going to want to see you do it.
Yeah. That was kind of my message to him, was like, let me just do it one more time. Like, remember, you're in the middle of lacrosse season, which you just started playing, and you've got soccer, you're still in club soccer, and you've got fall high school soccer. Like, you've all these things you've been working for. Just think about that.
Yeah.
And he's like, whatever, Dad.
It's hard to keep a young guy down when he's on a ski slope, though. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. Especially if he's getting good pics to send to the women friends. Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Industrious Podcast. Thank you all for joining us from wherever you get your podcasts, or if you're joining us on the Assessa YouTube channel, thank you for doing so. Hit that little subscribe button, the little notification bell icon, so you can be alerted when new episodes like this one drop. If you haven't done so already, we would greatly appreciate it. Today, we have the privilege of being joined by Mr. Pete Ward. Pete, welcome to the Industrious Podcast.
You. Great to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. Pete is the COO of the Indianapolis Colts, if you didn't already know. Pete, why don't you give a quick little background on, where were you born, raised, and some background story that most folks might not know?
I was born in New Orleans, and
I didn't know that.
Moved around quite a bit as a kid because I was an Army brat. Ended up in California for the formative years of my youth, and then moved out to the East Coast late in high school. Went to college out east. And one thing led to another, and that's how I ended up in Baltimore with the Colts.
So
UVA,
moving
right?
around, yeah.
Yes.
Moving around, what triggered Virginia?
Honestly, it was we lived in Northern Virginia. Okay. My dad worked at the Pentagon, and I, it was a state school, and it was a good school, and my dreams were to go to school out west, but I got into UVA, and it was economical. Back then, it was just incredibly inexpensive to attend.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up at UVA.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your major?
I created my own major. It was called sports business, and they allowed me to create that major. And that was back at a time when there was only one university that offered a major anywhere in that realm, and that was University of Ohio, or Ohio University. I'm sorry. And and so I went to my advisor and I said, hey, if I put these courses together, could you approve my own major? And he said, yeah. And after that, after I graduated, they made it into a regular major in the phys ed
You get
department.
royalties on that?
Is there any footnote? Is there at least a footnote as a source?
No, but now I was told there are 468 colleges and universities that offer a sports administration or sports business type of a degree.
Right.
So what,
very cool.
What drove your desire at that time to say, I'm interested in business, but there's the sports element to it?
Well, honestly, so just going back a few years, when I was a kid in California, I visited the Dallas Cowboys training camp. They were in Thousand Oaks, and I was a huge football fan. I was 11 years old, and we left that training camp with me wanting to be an NFL player. But I also noticed, the ball boys and the support staff on the sideline and that sort of thing. And that really intrigued me. And so when I stopped growing, I turned my attention to working, in pro football in some way. It was always NFL. That was my goal as a kid. And so up until college, and that's what drove me to, create that made. I really thought that was the best way to get into pro football back.
That's interesting. We have a similar story because I too had NFL aspirations, but I stopped growing when I was 10. So that was that.
Well, pretty similar.
So after you graduated, how long was it before you got your first role?
Well, it was during college. Excuse me. My parents lived 2 miles from the Redskins headquarters, and so I went to them one Christmas and asked them if they could use a free volunteer for the summer, and they said no, they didn't have any openings, and Baltimore was the next stop. So I went to them, and they said sure, yeah. And it wasn't even called an internship. I was like, I'm going to volunteer for them for the summer.
Right.
You were just the kid that kept showing up at that time.
Well, Baltimore is still an hour away from our home, so, but they seemed really appreciative that I wanted to work for free. And back then, I don't think labor laws were adhered to as much as they are today, so I literally did work for free, and but it became an official internship, and I was able to apply that to my major, and get college credit for.
That's great.
That's cool.
That was in 1981.
At 81,
Okay.
so do you count that as part of your 40-plus year span?
That was so my summer internship came to an end, and people in the office said, "Oh, it's too bad you have to go back to college. We could really use your help, and we need, that." So I talked to my parents about taking a semester off and just continuing, and they approved it, and so I stayed there through the season. So that was my first season. Okay. So this season coming up will be number 84. I'm sorry, 44.
44.
Yeah,
okay.
that's right.
Hey,
Seems like,
you
seems
look
like
good.
84.
You were 2 years old when you had your internship, right?
So
that's impressive.
Help my history here. At that time, were the Baltimore Colts under Irsay ownership Irsay family ownership at that time?
They were under the ownership of Bob Irsay.
Okay, right. Okay. I was 6 in 84 when the Colts made that move to Indy, so my memory of that time frame is a little foggy.
Mm-hmm.
Although I do certainly have plenty of memories of attending the Hoosier Dome at the time, the early years, and then ultimately as they, in a way, matriculated up to becoming the much bigger, more prominent program within the overall NFL.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I started, so just going back, the Colts, are certainly one of the most historic, iconic franchises. The Colts were one of the two teams that played in probably the most significant game in NFL history. That was the 58 championship game.
Mm-hmm.
And that game introduced the nation to the drama and excitement of NFL football. And television was, just a boon for the NFL because the sport translated so well to television, with the speed and, physicality and the strategy, and the drama. And, it has the yard lines so you could see how fast somebody was actually running. And so by 1964, everything I've read from marketing studies is that the NFL surpassed baseball in the most popular viewing sport in America. Then, literally, almost exactly 10 years after that 58 championship game, the second most significant game in NFL history was Super Bowl III, and the Colts are in that one again. Yeah. So by the time I started, there was just this iconic franchise. And when I walked in the door, I was like in awe, and I worked in media relations. I had access to all the archives, and it was just magical, for me. So, and there were still some guys left when I started, like Burt Jones was in his last year, and Roger Carr was there, and guys from the Sack Pack, some really iconic, players were still there at the end of their career,
Yeah. So you were there, though, in the 83, 84 span. What was that like?
Well, 83 was, was great. We actually were competitive that year. We were 6-4 one year. Frank Kush was in his second year as head coach. And we had like the top running game in the league that year. And then we fell into a tailspin toward the end of the year. We finished 7-9. So we were actually looking for it. 84, we thought we had some good potential. And then January 19th of 84 was when Mr. Irsay struck a handshake deal with the governor of Arizona. And I was called into the general manager's office. His name was Ernie Corsi at the time. And he said, "We're moving to Phoenix," and I was like low man on the totem pole as cheap labor. And they said, "I need you to help, with the logistics of the move. It might happen as early as this weekend and so forth." And then I went back to my office. I called my parents. My office was a little cubicle, I was like administrative assistant. I was low man. But I was also the do everything person, sub for the receptionist or drive, players who have been cut to the airport, that type of thing. But I also was in charge of logistics like buses and trucks and training camps and that sort of thing. So that made me, somewhat valuable in this whole scheme to move the team. And but about 20 minutes later, I was called back to his office, and he was in there with another employee, and that was a good friend of his, and he was on the phone with Mr. Irsay, and he hung up, and he said, somebody leaked it, and Bob's pissed off, and he wants me to call a press conference tonight at the airport. And he said, and he looked at me and said, "What the blank is he doing?" Now, I was just, right. This young guy. So that night we went to the airport. I followed him to the airport, and we were there for this now infamous press conference at the Baltimore Washington International Airport. It was in a private FBO. But all of Baltimore media was there, and the satellite trucks were all out in front. And they actually broke away live for this press conference because this was a huge deal,
Sure, certainly.
That the team had struck a deal to move out of Baltimore.
Then what was actually announced, though? I mean, was it announced to go to Arizona, or did things change?
No, so Mr. Irsay backed out. He was irritated that somebody had leaked it, and he backed out. He said, "I have no intention of moving the team." You can Google a press conference, and I don't know what you all are doing here, and blankety blankety blank, and so forth. And so, but no one believed him. So our relationship with our fan base and our community was really blown to hell that night, And then a few weeks later, Memphis entered into the rumor mill very briefly. And then a few weeks after that, Indianapolis surfaced.
And we just had this random stadium sitting downtown that,
and it was purpose-built. At the time, it was a state-of-the-art stadium. It was a dome, for one thing.
Yeah.
It had suites, which most stadiums didn't have back then. It had brand new AstroTurf, which was still pretty novel back then. It had a big screen in one end zone, which was more than most stadiums had. The big screen was probably as big as that wall.
Right.
It was horrible, clarity. But it was state of the art. Yeah. So, I think if Indianapolis didn't have the Hoosier Dome, we probably would have ended up somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like going through the process of moving? I mean, that had to be a pretty interesting time.
It was late in the day on March 28th. That's coming up. 40th anniversary is coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Next week.
Yeah.
And
wow.
So, I was called into Jim's office, and he said, my dad says we're moving, and you need to Indianapolis. And to begin with, it was March 28th. That's late in the year.
Oh, yeah.
So I had concluded by then that this is all just talk to kind of, get a better deal on a new lease with the city of Baltimore. It's too late to move. We have the draft coming up in a few weeks. We got mini camp coming up a week after that. We already have a deal for our training camp in Westminster, Maryland, and it was just, there's no way we could move, So when he told me, I was really stunned, but he said, come back, go home, come back at 10 o'clock, get your personal life in order, but you need to be here to lend some semblance of order to this thing, because at 10 o'clock, all these trucks are going to arrive and the Packers are going to be here, and you got to, help supervise this thing with the Packers. And so I did, and 10 o'clock came around, all these Mayflower trucks started wheeling in. We're kind of out in the country, so it was dark, and they had their lights out. And so 14 trucks showed up, and then a bus. And I was trying, why is the bus here? I thought, did they run out of trucks, And I got up on the bus, and it was just filled with, guys. And those were the Packers. The first guy singing up front goes, hey, man, is this an embassy or what? Because the embassy's moving in the middle of it. I said, no, it's a football team, And fortunately, there were no cell phones back then. So,
right.
So it was kept under wraps for a couple of hours. And then somebody with, internally broke it to the local radio. Yeah. And then that's when all hell broke loose.
Yeah.
So we're there all night, and by 8 a.m., I lay down in my empty office just to try to catch like a half hour of sleep, and I dozed, but then before I knew it, there were all these people in my office, and there are like 15 unhappy faces, and those were employees that didn't know what else to do. They were employees that weren't part of this move, and they were in there because I was the first person they encountered, and they didn't know what else to do but to show up for work. And so that was really heartbreaking,
Yeah.
And they were told that, thanked for their service, but told they would not be making the move. And I don't think most of them probably would have made that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're native Baltimore residents. And so there was certainly mixed emotions for me. There was a lot of adrenaline and excitement because we're moving to this new city, a new start. Baltimore at the time was a pretty hostile place to be working with the Colts, and Indianapolis was overjoyed to welcome this new NFL team. So it was exciting, but certainly mixed emotions because you're leaving a lot of good people behind.
Yeah.
Do you think moving around growing up lent itself to you saying, hey, you didn't have any issue moving?
Maybe, but I didn't have much of a life, much of a personal life then, and so it was easy for me to up and I hardly had any possessions,
Sure.
And so I was easy for me.
In 1984, he's like, Indianapolis, I think I've flown over that before.
Yeah, I had driven through it. I wasn't, at the time, as a young guy, I was kind of wishing, I could only move to Phoenix, because I just didn't know that much about Indianapolis.
Right.
And now I consider myself a native, I love Indianapolis.
So 40 years is coming up. That's quite a while. The Colts have played a huge role in this city, or you can argue for this state over that 40-year span. What things come to mind, like the top 3 to 5 things come to mind in terms of what kind of impact the Colts have made to the city and to the state.
Sure. Well, let me start by just saying that our first 10 years in India, I don't have proud memories because Mr. Ursay, for all the good things he did, for the city and state, really didn't believe in investing in the community or investing in winning on the field. And he was of the old school mind that, well, we're an NFL team. I don't have to spend a dime. People will come, Jim and I talked many times about, if we could just do this and this and this and this, and it was probably beneficial to me because I had to do all these different things, at the time. And so did Jim, he was named general manager at age 24. So we're kind of thrown into the fire. We didn't have somebody to sell sponsorships or to deal with community groups, or to deal with the city. And so I was, kind of start doing these, selling game program ads, editing the game program, but also doing all the operational things as well. And so I learned how to do all that stuff, and it made me more valuable to the franchise, really, not intentionally. It's just the way it worked out, and so, and I'm not saying I did it well, but we're just trying to manage. So for the first 10 years, we were really constantly scrambling, and there was never any stability. There was never a stability with, on the football side. Not until Jim really took over. He really took over in 95. He became official owner in 97, but he was able to observe how not to run a franchise, and he never agreed with his dad on most things, So we were finally able to start investing in winning, investing in the community, and it has been passed on to his daughters, who are now involved with the franchise, about giving back to the community, being a part of the fabric of the community, and so that's probably something that I'm most proud of. It seems more often than not, if the city or a cause is in need of a hand, we get a call, and that's something that we feel is really an obligation. This community has done a lot for us, and we need to give back. So,
yeah. Well, there's obviously you can quantify the impacts of having an NFL franchise in your city, economically and beyond. But some of those intangibles that are difficult to quantify are if not equal to, maybe greater in merit than just the pure economics of it. I think I've probably told this story on a prior podcast, but our parents are both entrepreneurs, which is where we really kind of, our whole family lineage has kind of been passed down to us in that regard. Our mother opened frozen yogurt stores in Indianapolis back in the late 80s and had them through maybe 02, 03 before she sold them off. So Freshen's Frozen Yogurt is where we kind of got our start.
Jim routinely visited the 86
So that's my story. Is so when this was like early 90s, certainly pre-Manning era, in the lean years, we'll call it, from the win-loss column standpoint. And Jim would come in, with his kids. They were younger, obviously. I was probably, 13, 14 years old, maybe. And he would come in regularly, and he'd bring things like, full-size regulation helmets with autographs. He'd say, "Hey, you want tickets? Here's tickets." I mean, it was so small of a gesture, but meaningful or impactful that it sticks with me, the level of generosity and to some degree sort of community outreach, and trying to create relationship there.
Yeah. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. I mean, because what he and his daughters do now, and there's so many things that they do that are not publicized, and they don't want to publicize it, but it starts at the top, and the example they've set for the rest of the organization is truly remarkable. And so that's one of the things I'm most fulfilled by is the things that we do to make our community a better place. I think that a winning team probably is as important as giving away millions to philanthropy because I've seen what that does to our community. I stop at our local Kroger in Zionsville after a win on my way home versus after a loss, the difference is palpable, and to see how our community came together, back when we won the Super Bowl after we won the championship game against New England was just a remarkable thing. And, you had, Republicans and Democrats hugging in the streets and, it just affects, I really think it affects the mental health of our community.
Well, I recall very vividly being at the game at the RCA Dome. I will always call it the Hoosier Dome. Kind of like always calling Deer Creek.
Sure.
Driving home after the win in the AFC Championship game against the Patriots, finally getting that, chip off the shoulder or whatever. And people, driving up Meridian around the circle to come north, and the entire city was out, and everyone, high-fiving through the car windows and all that. That was that was an incredible feeling. So anything you want to do or the team can do to help us repeat that feeling and relive that'd be great.
No, I know. I got a letter from an elementary school teacher in northern Indiana after we won the Super Bowl, and we played against the Bears. And this was Bears territory.
Right, yeah.
And she said it was always all you ever saw were Bears apparel, but when we won the Super Bowl against the Bears, kids came in wearing blue and white, and other people have told me from Northern Indiana, we're in our Colts, state, so.
Well, that's good.
Speaking of that, like along those lines, it's challenging especially in a market like Indianapolis. Like if you take professional baseball, for example, if you do a poll of people in Indy on what Major League Baseball team they follow, you're going to get a lot of Cubs, a little bit of Sox, a lot of Reds, and definitely some Cardinals. And so it would be interesting to see if a Major League Baseball team ever came to Indy, at what point they would start to turn and truly be the home team.
Yeah.
When did you see, and maybe today's a little different, maybe it's not. When do you feel like that tide turned where the Colts became truly the home team in Indianapolis versus the Bears or the Bengals or anyone for that matter?
I think it was the Tony Dungy, Peyton Manning era in its prime. 1995, we went to the championship game in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
lost by a hair. And then in 1996, we opened against the Cardinals at home. And if you look at our highlight film from that year, the home opener, camera pans the crowd, and you see no blue. So even after that, it still wasn't a Colts town. It still wasn't a Colts town, even after that exciting playoff run. But I'm telling you, winning the right way, is what does it. And winning the right way. I mean, like Tony Dungy created Colts fans that weren't even football fans. Mm-hmm. He created, a lot of Colts fans nationwide. And people like, Peyton Manning and Edgerrin James and exciting, Marvin. I mean, just so many great personalities are what did it, honestly, but doing it the right way.
Yeah. Interesting.
Doing it with integrity and good people.
Right. You have played a lot of roles, or in a lot of roles with the Colts. Had to ask you this question. What are some of the complexities of running an NFL team that the average casual NFL fan doesn't think about or probably doesn't think about?
Sure.
They see the football side, but they don't understand all the business side. If you will.
In a lot of ways, we're just like any other corporation. We've got an accounting department, we got sales, and HR and so forth. But then we're not, because we're really two separate worlds that have to work together. And a lot of times your business side, your marketing side they have the same goals as the football side, but going about them is different. And so you've got to manage that, there have been instances where, the football side may not agree with the music that you're playing or when it's played or things like that.
The
or
mashup of sports and entertainment.
Yeah. Or player appearances in the community and the timing of that. And so there's a constant dance between, but the dynamic that we have in our building now is wonderful. I mean, Chris Ballard understands that we have to market our team in the right way, and the marketing department understands sales, understands that, we've got to win. And so there's got to be give and take on both sides. So you got to manage that. And it's all about distractions and minimizing those, but doing things in the right way. So that's what makes it different than a regular business. Is you've got two different worlds that have to kind of work together. And I think we're doing that right now. This past season, we weren't a great team. We're competitive, but we sold out every game. and the NFL does a survey of the fans' experience after every game.
Okay.
And we ranked in the top 5 of every NFL team. And it was one of our highest scores ever. And that was without making the playoffs. And so I think we're at a point now where our game presentation is attractive and appealing to our fans, really regardless of whether we win or lose. And that's really the ultimate, is they make fans feel like they're getting their money's worth, regardless of what happens on the field, because you can't really control what happens on the field,
Yeah.
So
that's interesting you say that about this year, because this year to me, weird. The word weird has a negative connotation, but it was kind of weird, and just not from a negative standpoint. I think people are excited about the Anthony Richardson draft pick. Then he goes down, and they were like, "Oh, now what's going to happen?" Gardner filled the spot really well. We didn't make the playoffs, but I felt like the year was not a wash. I mean, there were still plenty of positive moments,
Sure.
and I felt like most people would say that it still wasn't a bad year. So it kind of jives with what you're saying.
Yeah. And I can tell from where I sit and observe the game, I can just tell when the crowd is engaged or not, and it was just different this year.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would like to, as a fan, make a few requests. Number one, I appreciate the free popcorn when I walk into the seats, because the weight of my heart is through my stomach. Popcorn is a good start. That's only in the club sections, by the way. So, well, why'd you have to out me there?
They're giving you
paid
away.
for it. We paid for it.
It's paid for, but in the moment, it feels free. I would like to request, or we can issue some sort of mandate that when we host the Steelers, shout out to our Pittsburgh team, that when the Steelers play in town, that we limit the number of Steelers fans are allowed in the stadium.
Yeah.
If that's at all possible.
Well, that's been an age-old dilemma.
They travel well.
So, and it happens with Packers and the Cowboys.
Certainly.
And the Bears.
Yeah, we made an acquisition in Pittsburgh. It's been just over about a year and a half ago. And the first Colts Steelers game here in Indy last year, we had the gentleman that we purchased the company from, who still works for us, brought him to Indy for the game. And everything starts up, to Joe's point. All of a sudden, the number of terrible towers, looking around like, oh my God, they're everywhere. And he's like, has this big old shit-eating grin on his face. And I'm like, that's just great. I enjoy it. Unfortunately, I think they won the game.
Yeah,
we lost the
Steelers
game.
won that game.
Steelers won. So he was a very happy camper. So then we took him to St. Elmo's. Didn't say anything about the shrimp cocktail sauce.
Right.
He put a big scoop of that in his mouth, and we got him back. So it all worked out.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, that's it's a fine line that you have to deal with fans. Your season ticket holders selling tickets because there's an argument from a lot of our fans that say, hey, this is how we can afford season tickets, if we can sell one or two of our games. And that's something that we used to not consider, but the secondary market is much more mainstream now.
Yeah.
You don't have to buy them from a shady looking guy in the corner,
Right, yeah.
Although that guy charges less than fees. Just say.
Right.
The local hotels and restaurants appreciate when the visiting teams come into town for a home game, because it obviously there's that element of economic
There's
boost.
no question. They also appreciate it when we play a primetime night game.
Definitely.
Because the hotel rooms will fill up. And so that's certainly a byproduct of having a winning team and a playoff team, is that you're going to be rewarded with more home primetime games.
Yeah.
Well, as Indiana grads and big Indiana football and basketball fans, we certainly understand the value of being able to follow wins versus losses.
Sure.
And the experience that the change
Right.
in experience that has.
Right.
I want to go back real quick on a question I was thinking about. So you mentioned sports, sports business was a major that you essentially created at UVA. And at the time, only one other school had a similar program or even a similar theme program. Now it's mainstream within business schools, whether it be a part of the business school or some other school within a university system. You put yourself in the shoes of an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, early in their college career who says, I want to go into sports marketing, sports administration, call it what you will. What advice, looking back on your career, what's the biggest piece of advice you could give if you were standing in front of a room full of 18, 19-year-old young men and women that were interested in getting into that aspect?
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying I wish there weren't so many programs now, because you have, just do the math, you have a lot of kids that have dreams that aren't going to be fulfilled in sports because the jobs are don't match the number of graduates.
Right,
and I go and I speak to these classes, and they're all excited to hear my story, and they all want to kind of do what I'm doing, and I just know that it's just not physically possible. First thing I tell them is, have a backup plan, because sports is a crapshoot. But, if that's your dream, pursue your dream, but have a backup plan. And that's number one. Number two is whatever you need to get your foot in the door. And when you do, make yourself as valuable as possible. And when we have these young kids that come in and are doing cold calls for, ticket sales, which is not an enjoyable job.
Right.
I say, look, embrace the crap, embrace the crap jobs, and do things that no one else wants to do. And that's how you make yourself valuable, and that's how you make yourself noticed, and make it impossible for whoever you're working for to make yourself unexpendable.
Right.
So,
and they don't
that's my
know
advice,
it, but the things that they'll learn by doing some of that stuff they don't like, they learn a lot about themselves as well, which I don't,
Yeah,
an 18, 19 year
a
old
lot of them will learn that, hey, sports isn't really what I expected it to be. It's not all glamorous. It really isn't. And if you're looking to make a lot of money fast, or you're probably going to do better in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually just embrace the crap jobs. We have a saying in our house that my wife and I use with the kids, and we've kind of used this beyond that. Is we call it embrace the suck. Like, some things just suck. You don't want to do them. You don't want to experience them.
Yeah.
But it's a fact of life. You can either try to ignore it, but that's just, putting your head in the sand.
Right.
Or the alternative is just put your arms around it and embrace it.
Embrace the crap.
Yeah. Interesting. I like that. And I will also imagine, to the last point you made, that probably, I think 10% is probably being too generous, but we'll use the 90-10 rule. 10% of the world that you live in is what you see on TV or at a game. 90% of the world you live in is all behind the scenes. So with the 10% of glamour you see, there's 90% really hard work and grind going on.
Right.
That the casual fan or casual observer isn't.
No, and there's no question. I still get people that say, "Hey, how are you enjoying the off season?" Like
what off season?
Yeah, there's no off season. Yeah. I mean, right. As soon as that last game is over, you're right. All automatic. In fact, before that, you're into business plans and so forth. And when we moved here, we had 34 people. That included our coaches and our personnel department.
34
total, included coaches.
That's when you said included coaches, like that's not even a coaching staff these days, right?
Right. We had 8 coaches. That was our coaching staff. Now we have 230 full-time people.
Wow.
So yeah. But back then we didn't have a marketing department. We didn't have a sales department. We didn't have digital content or production. There's so many things we didn't have. We didn't have an HR department until 5 years ago.
Oh, really?
I mean, legitimately, we parceled it out among different people,
So what's one thing that people don't know about Pete Ward that you'd be open to sharing?
Gosh, I would say probably, that I'm just as big a football fan as I was back in 1981. And the most exciting time for me with my job, the most exciting time is 2 minutes before kick. I'm just a big fan. Yeah, and that's why what it comes down to.
So where are you at 2 minutes before kickoff? Like on a game day, I'm sure there's certain things you're checking off the list in your mind, if not physically, but where are you 2 minutes before kickoff?
Put on the blue head and getting ready to go out on the stadium.
Turn the fan on to inflate the costume.
I have a perch up in the press box, which is sky high in Lucas Oil Stadium with the window open, and I can see, everything. And I sit with Matt Conte, who's our great VP of football communications, and we have a telephone console, and we have walkie-talkies, and of course there's cell phones, and we're just there, kind of, there to troubleshoot and react as needed,
But you made a point to say I got the window open, so you just get the full experience of that noise coming up.
Yeah, because you want to hear what's being said. And you like to hear, how crowd reacts to certain things and that sort of thing. So sure.
Yeah. It's a real rarity these days. And I know this has already been written, but for someone to be with an organization for so long, I mean, we see in my generation, people bounce a lot, especially in those first 5 to 10 years out of college. And I think today, it's become even more prevalent, keep people bouncing around every 3, 5, 8 years. There's no real point other than just to say I really admire you for that. I mean, it's a real rarity that someone does that. And I think there's no question the Colts are better off for having you over all these years, and the city of Indianapolis to the same extent.
Well, thank you. But I've been fortunate too, to be with the team that long. And there were a couple of times where I was pretty much dead and gone, by Jim's dad, and Jim saved me both times, so I owe it to him, and it's been certainly a dream come true for me, and just as an aside, I was a huge Cowboy fan when I was a kid, and this is before it was cool to be a Cowboy fan. It was back in the days of Don Meredith, and Dwayne Thomas, and they lost the Super Bowl V to the Colts in the last 5 seconds. Jim O'Brien kicked a field goal that won it for the Colts, and I went up my room and I cried, and I developed a fever, and just I had a nervous breakdown because the Cowboys kept losing every year, in the last seconds, and so 53 years later, like a few weeks ago, I get in the mail a letter from Jim O'Brien, the kicker, who kicked that field goal, and a photo of him making that kick that I'd never seen before. And he had gotten word that I was a Cowboy fan, and he sent me a letter saying, a really nice letter, but it was just an incredible thing. I could never have imagined back in January 71, that 53 years later, I would get a letter and a photo from that same guy,
That's cool.
It was just, it was just surreal.
And representing, the pinnacle of his organization, the organization that he played for.
But it also just kind of brought to,
it's like a full circle moment.
Brought to the fore. It's like, my gosh, I can't believe that I'm doing this, and it's just been I've been really fortunate. So I count my blessings, Yeah.
Well, great.
Fantastic.
Well, as Colt season ticket holders since day one through our father, we appreciate your support and service to the Colts.
We appreciate your support. I mean, that's awesome. Yeah. So day one, that means 84.
84.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
We also appreciate everything that not just the Colts, but also you do personally here in the city. We appreciate all the support that you give not just our organization, but other organizations as well. We appreciate that. Well, it's a pleasure, and the same to you guys. I mean, you guys do so much for the cause, with cancer and so forth, and that's a cause that's near and dear to my heart. So the feeling's mutual. All right, great, and thanks for your time today. We appreciate you coming in. All right, thank you guys. Appreciate it. And thank all you guys for tuning into this episode of the Industrious Podcast. We appreciate you joining us from wherever you hear podcasts. And for those of you, again, tuning in on the Assessor YouTube channel, thank you for watching. Until next time, guys, don't forget, be industrious.